Matt, we have a big fight coming up at women's flyweight between Viviane Araujo and Montana De La Rosa. And Matt, where Mark De La Rosa has faltered in the UFC, Montana De La Rosa has really thrived. We've seen her look very, very good. I know she has the one loss in her last five, but I mean, stuff like that happens, especially when you're taking on top flight competition in a division that's really growing. Decision loss to Andrea Lee. She really picked it up in her last time out, getting the win over Mara Romero Barella. And if you look across the cage at Viviane Araujo, she was on a nice little win streak. Former Pancrase champ coming into the UFC, picked up a big win on short notice against Talita Bernardo. She finished her there. Then she fought Alexis Davis, the tough Canadian. And then in her last fight, she lost to Jessica Eye. And it was one of those fights where if you look at the numbers, 29-28 across the board, she won the first round in that fight, didn't totally tail off, but gave Eye a path to victory. And Matt, I know, depending on what side of the fence you are with Jessica Eye, maybe you're from Cleveland and you just dislike her Vegas attitude now, but she's really fought an upper level of competition for a really long time at flyweight. People might be down on her from the fight that she had somewhat recently against Cynthia Calvillo, but regardless of your stance on Jessica Eye, Viviane Araujo, the ceiling was incredibly high on her. There were possible, title aspirations. There still are, of course, but like we're talking on the same level as, and I don't think it's a stretch, Amanda Hebos at one point here relatively recently. I think we lost a lot of stock in that loss to Jessica Eye, but Viviane Araujo does a lot of things really well. Her defensive grappling leaves a little bit to be desired, but her stand-up's great. And on the flip side, Montana De La Rosa is pretty good on the ground.
Exactly. So the weird thing about Viviane Araujo is that in the Talita Bernardo fight, you don't see a lot of like legit flatline KOs in women's MMA. And the fact that she was able to do that above her own weight class at bantamweight was really impressive. Now, of course, Bernardo is not some world beater, but still, it's just not really a way that you see a lot of fights being finished in that division. And then, okay, so you get that great performance, and then you move down and you fight Alexis Davis, a woman with more experience than really most people, really a pioneer of women's MMA. And again, she didn't look completely dominant, but she did really well against that veteran. So then it was, okay, if you beat Jessica Eye, we're going to rush you, but it's women's flyweight. You might be able to fight for a title. And Jessica Eye, it was just one of those cases where I don't think Eye was the better fighter, but she was the busier fighter. And that really cost Araujo as the fight went on. Like you had mentioned, she won that first round. And it's not that she tailed off. She just kind of went into cruise control from that point on and just kept on doing the same thing over and over and over again. And Eye was just able to sort of, close the distance, land power shots, and just kind of take the fight from Araujo as it went on. With Montana De La Rosa, I think that Andrea Lee fight is really important because in the Andrea Lee fight, it showed kind of the limits of De La Rosa's striking because De La Rosa, she's at her best when it's, okay, throw with that boxing combination, go for the takedown. Kind of fights, again, not to the same capacity, but sort of that Frankie Edgar style where you're really trying to mix it up, go really heavy volume, go for the takedown, rinse and repeat. But when Andrea Lee was able to just defend the takedown, move, strike, you kind of saw her start to piece out De La Rosa as the fight was going on. And I do see this fight taking a similar path if Araujo is able to start defending a few takedowns because De La Rosa has decent cardio, but I don't think she has cardio that's so much better than Araujo's that it's going to really be able to take advantage.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the wins that De La Rosa has, let's go in the last five. Christina Marks, who didn't make it to the UFC off The Ultimate Fighter, who was actually featured with Fight Night Picks on the website, did an interview with her getting ready for WBKFF, the lesser of the bare knuckles, that didn't really make the leap after their inaugural event. Look into that one. So she has a win over her. She beat Rachel Ostovich by rear naked. That happens. Nadia Kassem. We talked about Nadia last week when we talked about one of her opponents. It was a really tough fight for poor Nadia taking on Ji-Yeon Kim. So I look at these wins. I mean, the one over Mara Romero Barella was nice. Romero Barella had her in some tough spots in that fight and just didn't really do anything with them. And I know, people are definitely down on Mara Romero Barella lately. So it's really tough to try and paint a complete picture of Montana De La Rosa. I think she's still a prospect. I mean, she's 11-5. She's only 25 years old, halfway to 26. I think the ceiling's still relatively high. It's just, has she worked on her striking enough to hang in there with somebody like Araujo? I don't know. And I know pretty well what I'm going to get out of Viviane Araujo. Now, again, like I said from the start, I kind of worry about her grappling a little bit. In this fight, maybe not so much so. Over on Tapology at a 630 votes, 63%, going with Araujo. if you look over at the odds, now we talk about this week over week, but when there's this big shift in the odds, you have to worry. Montana De La Rosa opened as a -110, currently sitting around a +160. If you look over at Araujo, things really going in her favor. Again, opened at a pick on -110, currently riding around a -190. So money's really come in on Araujo. I like her to get the win in this fight. I think the ceiling's still very high. And the interesting thing about her too, she's almost 34 years old, but women over 32, 33 in this division have really seen key chances go their way, and they've really started to gain a lot of traction. It's not so much the fighters that were late in their career that came to flyweight to find success. It's fighters that have really blossomed into it. And I think Araujo is another one of those examples here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this is a pretty easy fight. Not easy fight for her, but I think it's an easy fight to get her back on track. Not that she's going to fight for a title by the end of the year or anything like that, but if she can get a win over De La Rosa, it just kind of proves that the hype that we had for her was somewhat justified. So I do think she'll be able to get back to her winning ways.
Matt, it should be a really interesting fight. Women's flyweight's on fire right now. Both of us going with Viviane Araujo. We've got an extended look that you're not going to want to miss between Alistair Overeem and Augusto Sakai in our main event. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.